What if all student loans vanished overnight in the US? You wake up on a Wednesday morning in Denver, reach for your phone to check your bank account out of habit, and see something that stops your heart. Your student loan balance shows $0. Not a payment processed, not an error message, just zero. Your hands shake as you scroll through news notifications flooding your screen. This isn't a glitch. This isn't a dream. Every student loan in America, federal, private, graduate, undergraduate, parent plus loans, has been completely erased overnight. The coffee shop where recent graduate Emma Martinez works while making minimum payments on her $85,000 psychology degree suddenly buzzes with customers frantically checking their phones. The construction site where Mike Chin, a 45-year-old who went back to school for engineering, has been working overtime to cover his $60,000 debt becomes a celebration ground. The hospital where Dr. Sarah Rodriguez has been paying $2,800 monthly on her medical school loans erupts in confused conversations between residents who can't believe what they're seeing on their loan servicer websites. But here's what makes this scenario truly transformative. It happened instantly, universally, and completely. No applications. No income verification. No political process. Just the complete elimination of $1.7 trillion in debt affecting 45 million Americans in 8 hours while the country slept. Picture the morning commute that becomes a celebration. Interstate highways across America fill with drivers calling friends and family, sharing the impossible news that their monthly financial burden, the payment that determined where they could live, what jobs they could take, when they could start families, simply no longer exists. The parking lots of government buildings that house loan servicing offices sit empty as millions of Americans discover they no longer need to navigate complex repayment systems, income-driven plans, or forgiveness applications. From Silicon Valley to rural communities, from recent graduates to middle-aged career changers, the same impossible reality unfolds. Stock markets initially crash as investors panic about the economic implications of $1.7 trillion in debt disappearing, but then surge as economists calculate the massive increase in consumer spending power. Banks that service student loans scramble to understand the implications while borrowers experience something most never thought they'd feel: complete freedom from educational debt. Emma Martinez stares at her phone outside the coffee shop where she's worked since graduating 2 years ago with a bachelor's degree in psychology. Her $85,000 debt, larger than her parents' mortgage, has vanished. She realizes with growing excitement that the $650 monthly payment she's been making while living with 3 roommates in a cramped apartment could now go towards saving for her own place, starting graduate school, or finally taking the unpaid internship at the nonprofit she's always wanted to work for. 3 time zones away in Boston, Dr. Sarah Rodriguez sits in her car outside Massachusetts General Hospital, staring at her loan servicer website showing a zero balance where $340,000 in medical school debt used to live. The $2,800 monthly payment that forced her to choose residency programs based on loan repayment assistance rather than her true interests has disappeared. For the first time since starting medical school, she can consider specializing in pediatrics or family medicine without worrying about whether she'll be able to afford her loan payments on a lower salary. The emotional tsunami hits families across America as they gather around breakfast tables, trying to comprehend their new financial reality. In a suburban home outside Chicago, elementary school teacher Patricia Williams sits with her husband Mark, a social worker, and their 2 teenage children. Both parents have been paying student loans for over 15 years. Patricia's teaching degree cost $45,000. Mark's social work master's added another $60,000. Their combined $800 monthly payments have prevented them from saving for their children's college education. Now suddenly they can. But it's not just individual relief. Small businesses owned by graduates struggling with loan payments suddenly have access to capital they've been paying to loan servicers instead of investing in growth. 28-year-old entrepreneur James Kim, who started a graphic design business while making $400 monthly payments on his art school loans, immediately sees possibilities he couldn't consider before: hiring his first employee, upgrading equipment, or expanding services. The ripple effects spread through every sector of American society. Teachers who chose their profession despite knowing their salaries would barely cover loan payments suddenly find teaching financially sustainable. Social workers, nonprofit employees, and public servants who qualified for income-driven repayment plans because their salaries were too low for standard payments discover they can live comfortably on their chosen career paths. Graduate students currently enrolled face an unexpected windfall. Maria Santos, in her second year of a PhD program in environmental science, was planning to graduate with $120,000 in debt and uncertain job prospects in academia. Now she can focus entirely on her research without the constant anxiety about how she'll repay loans on a postdoc salary. She can consider career paths based on passion and impact rather than earning potential. Social media explodes with confused posts, grateful tears, and growing excitement. #DebtFree America trends worldwide within hours, but the posts aren't angry or political. They're joyful and disbelieving. A nurse practitioner from Montana posts a video of herself crying in her car. "I've been paying $900 a month for 8 years on my master's degree. I can finally afford to have a baby." A teacher from Florida shares a photo of his loan balance statement showing zero. "I can finally take the job at the Title I school I've always wanted to work at." Money isn't the deciding factor anymore. The psychological impact is immediate and profound. Crisis hotlines receive calls, but not from people in distress. From people who can't believe their good fortune and need to talk through the implications with someone. Mental health professionals report that anxiety about financial security drops dramatically among their clients with student debt, replaced by excitement about possibilities they never allowed themselves to consider. The morning news broadcasts struggle to contextualize the unprecedented event. Financial analysts attempt to calculate the economic implications of suddenly injecting $1.7 trillion worth of spending power into the American economy. Educational experts debate what this means for future college attendance and tuition prices. Political commentators argue about the fairness of debt elimination without means testing or income limits. Children across America notice immediate changes in their parents' stress levels and household conversations. 12-year-old Marcus Thompson from Portland asks his mother, a nurse paying off her BSN degree, why she's crying happy tears at breakfast. She struggles to explain that the monthly payment that determined their family budget for his entire life simply no longer exists, opening up possibilities for family vacations, home improvements, and college savings she never dared to hope for. Government websites crash as former borrowers frantically check to confirm the elimination is real and permanent. Tax preparation services field thousands of calls from people wondering about the tax implications of debt forgiveness. Financial advisors are overwhelmed with clients wanting to restructure their budgets and investment strategies now that hundreds or thousands of dollars monthly are available for other purposes. By midday, the true scope of the transformation becomes clear. This isn't just about individual financial relief. It's about the reshaping of American economic mobility, career choices, and life decisions that have been constrained by educational debt for an entire generation. For decades, student loans have influenced where graduates live, what jobs they accept when they start families, and whether they can take entrepreneurial risks. All of those constraints vanish simultaneously. As the sun sets on this first day of debt-free America, families gather around dinner tables with a new sense of possibility. The financial stress that has defined household budgets, career decisions, and life planning for millions of Americans has evaporated. Children notice that their parents seem different, more relaxed, more optimistic, more open to dreams and possibilities they had put aside due to debt obligations. The first day ends with a country transformed in ways both obvious and subtle. The American dream, constrained for many by the burden of educational debt, suddenly becomes achievable for millions who had calculated that homeownership, entrepreneurship, or career changes were impossible while managing loan payments. But in that transformation, something else begins: questions about fairness, economic implications, and what this means for future generations of students. This is the story of what happens next, the story of 45 million Americans learning to navigate sudden financial freedom, communities adapting to massive increases in consumer spending power, and a society grappling with the elimination of debt that had become so normalized that its absence feels revolutionary. Day 7, the ripple effects begin. 7 days into America's debt-free experiment, the initial shock gives way to more complex economic, social, and psychological transformations that ripple through every sector of society. The housing market experiences immediate upheaval as millions of Americans suddenly qualify for mortgages they couldn't afford while making student loan payments. Real estate agent Jennifer Walsh in Austin, Texas, reports unprecedented activity. "I have clients who've been renting for years because their debt-to-income ratio prevented homeownership. Now they're pre-approved for mortgages and house hunting with down payment money they've been sending to loan servicers." The surge in housing demand creates bidding wars in markets that were already competitive. First-time homebuyers who had resigned themselves to permanent renting find themselves competing for properties alongside other newly debt-free graduates. Home prices increase rapidly in many markets as demand far outstrips supply. But the changes extend beyond real estate. Car dealerships report massive increases in sales as customers who had been driving aging vehicles while prioritizing loan payments suddenly have budget space for reliable transportation. 26-year-old teacher Amanda Rodriguez, who had been driving a 2008 Honda with 200,000 miles while making $500 monthly loan payments, purchases a new car for the first time in her adult life. Small businesses experience an unexpected boom as debt-free graduates have disposable income for services and products they've deferred for years. Hair salons, restaurants, entertainment venues, and retail stores report increased customer traffic from young adults who can finally afford more than basic necessities. The entrepreneurial explosion surprises economists and business analysts. Former graduates who had been working in jobs they disliked because they needed steady income to service debt begin taking risks they previously couldn't afford. Software developer Maria Gonzalez, who had been making $800 monthly payments on her computer science degree, quits her corporate job to launch a startup focused on educational technology. "I've wanted to start this company for 3 years," Maria explains while setting up her home office. "But I couldn't take the income uncertainty while carrying $95,000 in debt. Now I can bootstrap the business with the money I was sending to loan servicers and actually follow my entrepreneurial dreams." The nonprofit sector experiences unprecedented applications and staffing increases as graduates can finally afford careers in public service. AmeriCorps, Teach for America, and social service organizations report massive increases in applications from qualified candidates who previously couldn't accept low-paying positions while managing loan obligations. Educational institutions grapple with immediate and long-term implications. Current college students celebrate their debt elimination but wonder about tuition prices and future costs. Universities that had raised prices knowing students could borrow to cover increases face new pressure to justify their pricing as families calculate what they can afford to pay without loans. Graduate school applications surge as professionals who had been deterred by additional debt suddenly see advanced degrees as affordable options. Medical schools, law schools, and other professional programs report unprecedented application increases from candidates who can finally pursue their desired careers without fear of crushing debt loads. Mental health professionals document dramatic improvements in psychological well-being among former borrowers. Dr. Michael Chin, a therapist specializing in financial anxiety, reports that clients who struggled with debt-related stress show immediate improvements in sleep, relationships, and overall life satisfaction. Student debt creates a form of chronic stress that affects every life decision, Dr. Chin explains. When that burden disappears overnight, people experience psychological relief that extends far beyond financial concerns. They can finally make choices based on their values and interests rather than their debt obligations. The week ends with emerging questions about fairness and future policy. Americans who paid off their loans before the elimination express frustration about missing the windfall by months or years. Parents who sacrificed to pay for their children's education without loans wonder why they weren't rewarded for their financial responsibility. Recent graduates celebrate while older Americans question the equity of debt elimination that primarily benefits younger, educated demographics. As week 2 begins, America faces the challenge of adapting to massive economic changes while addressing concerns about fairness, sustainability, and the implications for future educational financing. Month 1. The new normal takes shape. 1 month into America's student debt-free reality, the initial euphoria gives way to more complex social and economic adjustments as society adapts to the largest wealth transfer in American history. The career transformation proves more dramatic than anyone anticipated. Industries that relied on debt-burdened graduates accepting low wages to gain experience find themselves competing for talent with significantly improved negotiating power. Teaching, social work, journalism, and nonprofit careers become viable options for graduates who previously needed higher-paying corporate jobs to service debt. Elementary school teacher Marcus Williams, who had been working summer jobs and tutoring evenings to manage his education degree payments, dedicates his newly available time to classroom preparation and professional development. "I became a teacher to make a difference," he reflects while creating lesson plans without the distraction of financial stress. "But I was spending so much time on second jobs to pay loans that I wasn't able to be the teacher I wanted to be." The geographic mobility revolution transforms American demographics as graduates are no longer tied to high-cost metropolitan areas due to loan payment obligations. Recent graduate Lisa Park moves from expensive San Francisco back to her hometown in Ohio, where her marketing skills make her competitive for remote work while her living costs drop dramatically. "I was stuck in San Francisco because I needed the higher salary to make my loan payments," Lisa explains while house hunting in a suburb where she can afford a mortgage. "Now I can live where I want to live and work for companies I'm passionate about, rather than just whoever pays the most." The entrepreneurship boom creates thousands of new small businesses as former graduates invest their previous loan payment money into startup ventures. Coffee shops, consulting firms, tech startups, and creative services businesses launch at unprecedented rates. The Small Business Administration reports a 300% increase in loan applications from college graduates starting new ventures. Local communities experience revitalization as educated young adults remain in or return to smaller cities and rural areas where they can afford to live comfortably while building businesses or working remotely. Towns that had been losing college-educated residents to major metropolitan areas see population stabilization and economic growth. Family planning decisions shift dramatically as couples no longer need to delay marriage, homeownership, or having children due to educational debt obligations. Wedding planners report increased bookings, fertility clinics see more patients, and real estate agents document increased searches for family-friendly homes from young couples. Sarah and David Kim, both teachers who had been delaying having children while managing combined loan payments of $1,200 monthly, announced their pregnancy. "We always wanted kids," Sarah explains, "but we couldn't afford childcare costs on top of our loan payments. Now we can finally start the family we've dreamed about." The savings revolution begins as Americans who had been unable to build emergency funds or retirement savings while making loan payments suddenly have significant monthly cash flow for financial security. Financial advisors report unprecedented demand from young adults seeking investment guidance for money previously allocated to debt service. The higher education sector faces immediate pricing pressure as families calculate what they can afford without borrowing. Private colleges that relied on students taking loans to cover high tuition costs find themselves competing more directly on price and value. Some institutions reduce tuition while others increase merit aid to maintain enrollment. State governments grapple with the implications for public university funding as debt elimination demonstrates the massive burden that educational costs had placed on graduates. Some states increase higher education funding to keep tuition affordable, while others debate whether the debt elimination creates moral hazard for future students. The month culminates in the first comprehensive economic analysis of the debt elimination's effects. Economists calculate that the $1.7 trillion in eliminated debt translates to approximately $200 billion annually in increased consumer spending power, creating multiplier effects throughout the economy as debt-free Americans purchase homes, cars, and services they had deferred while managing loan payments. Consumer spending increases drive job creation in sectors serving newly debt-free demographics: housing, automotive, retail, dining, and entertainment. Unemployment drops as economic activity increases and entrepreneurs launch businesses they couldn't afford to start while servicing educational debt. As month 2 approaches, America discovers that eliminating student debt doesn't just help individual borrowers. It transforms entire sectors of the economy and creates opportunities for economic growth, social mobility, and community development that had been constrained by the burden of educational financing. Month 3, Deeper Transformations. 3 months into America's post-debt reality, the most significant changes aren't economic. They're cultural and social transformations that reshape how Americans think about education, career, and life choices. The creativity revolution emerges as graduates who had been trapped in jobs they disliked solely to service debt begin pursuing careers aligned with their interests and values. Art schools that had been declining due to concerns about career prospects and loan burdens experience application surges. Music programs, creative writing degrees, and studio arts see renewed interest from students who can finally afford to follow their passions. 27-year-old musician Jake Rodriguez, who had been working in insurance sales to pay off his music composition degree, returns to performing and teaching music. "I got my degree in what I love but couldn't afford to work in my field because it doesn't pay enough to cover loan payments," he explains while preparing for his first concert in 3 years. "Now I can actually use my education the way I intended." The public service renaissance transforms government agencies and nonprofit organizations as qualified candidates who had been priced out of public service careers suddenly find them financially viable. The Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, and local government positions receive applications from graduates who previously couldn't accept lower salaries while managing debt obligations. Public defender offices, which had struggled to retain attorneys who left for higher-paying private practice to manage law school debt, experienced their first staffing stability in decades. Social service agencies hire qualified social workers who had been working in higher-paying but less satisfying corporate roles to service their graduate school loans. Educational choices shift as high school students and their families recalculate college decisions without the assumption of massive debt burdens. Students show increased interest in fields like education, social work, and public service that had been declining due to concerns about loan repayment on typical career salaries. The community college renaissance surprises educators as students who might have borrowed for expensive four-year degrees instead choose more affordable paths to career training. Community colleges report increased enrollment and improved completion rates as students make educational decisions based on learning goals rather than loan availability. Mental health outcomes continue improving as the chronic stress of debt management disappears from millions of lives. Relationship counselors report decreased financial conflict among couples. Family therapists document improved parent-child relationships as household financial stress decreases dramatically. Dr. Patricia Santos, a marriage counselor, observes significant changes in her practice. Financial stress from student loans was underlying so many relationship problems. Couples fought about money constantly when large loan payments dominated their budgets. When that pressure disappears, they can focus on deeper relationship issues and building their futures together. The geographic rebalancing of America accelerates as college graduates relocate based on quality of life, family connections, and community preferences rather than salary requirements to service debt. Rural communities and smaller cities experience educated population growth for the first time in decades. Small towns that had been losing young adults to major metropolitan areas begin attracting remote workers and entrepreneurs who can afford to live anywhere. Local businesses benefit from increased spending by educated residents who have disposable income for the first time since graduation. The innovation surge creates unexpected technological and social advances as entrepreneurs who had been constrained by debt obligations launch ventures addressing societal challenges. Educational technology, environmental solutions, and social impact businesses emerge from founders who can finally afford to pursue mission-driven rather than profit-maximized ventures. Environmental lawyer turned entrepreneur Michelle Park launches a clean energy consulting firm that she had conceptualized but couldn't afford to start while making $1,100 monthly law school loan payments. "I wanted to work on climate solutions but needed corporate law salary to pay my loans," she explains while meeting with her first clients. "Now I can align my career with my values." The month ends with the first major research study on post-debt life satisfaction showing unprecedented improvements in career satisfaction, relationship quality, and overall well-being among former student loan borrowers. The study reveals that debt elimination affects life choices far beyond simple financial relief, enabling people to make decisions based on personal fulfillment, community connection, and social contribution rather than economic necessity. As month 4 begins, America learns that student debt elimination isn't just about financial relief. It's about unleashing human potential that had been constrained by economic obligations, creating possibilities for innovation, service, and creativity that benefits entire communities and society. Month 6, the fairness question. 6 months into the post-student debt era, America grapples with complex questions about equity, responsibility, and the unintended consequences of universal debt elimination that challenge assumptions about fairness and social policy. The generational tension becomes unavoidable as older Americans who sacrifice to pay off their student loans or avoid borrowing for education express frustration about missing the windfall. Robert Chin, 52, who paid off his MBA loans through 15 years of strict budgeting and delayed gratification, struggles with resentment toward colleagues who received identical educations but now have $80,000 more lifetime wealth due to timing. I bought used cars and lived in a small apartment for years to pay off my loans responsibly, Robert explains during a community forum on debt elimination fairness. My coworker graduated the same program 2 years after me and gets a free $80,000 windfall. How is that equitable? I'm happy for people getting relief, but what about those of us who made sacrifices to be financially responsible? Parents who worked multiple jobs or depleted savings to pay for their children's education without loans face similar frustrations. Maria Rodriguez, who cleaned offices at night to pay her daughter's college tuition without borrowing, questions whether her financial sacrifices were foolish in retrospect. I wanted my daughter to graduate debt-free, so I worked 2 jobs and didn't save for retirement for 4 years, Maria reflects. Families who borrowed for education now have that debt erased and can use their income for other things. Those of us who sacrifice to avoid debt get nothing for our responsibility. The racial and class implications emerge as economists analyze who benefits most from universal debt elimination. Higher-income families whose children attended expensive private colleges see larger absolute debt reductions than moderate-income families whose children attended state schools with lower costs. Graduate degree holders, who tend to have higher lifetime earning potential, receive larger debt elimination benefits than those with bachelor's degrees only. The geographic disparities create political tensions as debt elimination disproportionately benefits metropolitan areas with high concentrations of college graduates while providing less direct benefit to rural communities with fewer degree holders. Rural America experiences indirect benefits through increased economic activity but feels excluded from the direct wealth transfer. Congressional representative from rural Iowa, Tom Bradley, voices constituent concerns. My district has farmers, factory workers, and small business owners who didn't go to college but whose tax dollars support federal programs. They're watching college graduates get massive debt relief while seeing no direct benefit for their own financial struggles with farm loans, small business debt, or medical bills. The behavioral economics questions intensify as researchers study whether debt elimination creates moral hazard for future students and families. Early data suggests that high school students show less price sensitivity in college choices, potentially allowing institutions to raise prices knowing that debt elimination precedent exists. Financial aid officers report changes in family decision-making processes as students assume future debt relief possibilities in their educational planning. Some families increase borrowing for college expenses beyond tuition, reasoning that comprehensive debt elimination could extend to living expenses and other educational costs. The economic multiplier effects create winners and losers across different sectors and communities. Local businesses in college towns and metropolitan areas with high concentrations of graduates experience significant increases in consumer spending. Rural areas and regions with fewer college graduates see less direct economic stimulus from debt elimination. The housing market distortions intensify as debt-free graduates compete for limited housing stock in desirable markets. Home prices increase rapidly in areas popular with young professionals, potentially pricing out existing residents who didn't benefit from debt elimination. First-time homebuyer programs designed for moderate-income families find themselves competing with debt-free graduates who suddenly qualify for larger mortgages. Small business impacts vary significantly based on customer demographics and location. Restaurants, retail stores, and service businesses in areas with high concentrations of former student borrowers experience growth, while similar businesses in regions with fewer college graduates see no debt elimination benefits and face increased competition for discretionary spending. The month culminates in the first major political controversy over debt elimination as state governments debate whether to provide similar relief for residents who didn't attend college or who paid off educational debt before the elimination date. Some states propose fairness payments to residents who missed debt elimination, while others argue that universal education benefits would be more equitable than retroactive debt relief. Community forums across America host heated debates about fairness, responsibility, and social policy. The conversations reveal fundamental disagreements about individual responsibility versus societal support, the role of government in addressing educational costs, and how to balance relief for those who benefited from debt elimination with recognition for those who didn't. As month 7 begins, America learns that even overwhelmingly positive policy changes create complex equity questions and unintended consequences that challenge simple narratives about fairness and social justice. The debt elimination success for millions of individuals creates new questions about how society should address systemic problems while maintaining equity across different groups and generations. Year 1, the new social contract. 12 months after the overnight elimination of student debt, America has developed a fundamentally different relationship between education, career, and financial security that reshapes the social contract between individuals, institutions, and society. The career liberation movement matures into a sophisticated ecosystem of purpose-driven work as professionals freed from debt obligations create new models of employment that prioritize social impact, creative expression, and community benefit alongside financial sustainability. Traditional corporate career paths lose their monopoly on college graduate employment as alternative careers become financially viable. Teaching sees the most dramatic transformation as educators can finally afford to remain in the profession long-term. Chronic teacher shortages disappear in many districts as graduates choose education careers without worrying about loan repayment on teacher salaries. Classroom quality improves as teachers have time and mental energy for professional development rather than second jobs to service debt. Principal Jennifer Walsh observes the changes in her suburban Denver elementary school. We have teachers applying who previously would have gone into corporate jobs just to pay loans. They're passionate about education and can finally afford to follow that passion. Our retention rates are the highest they've ever been because teachers aren't leaving for higher-paying jobs to manage debt. The nonprofit sector experiences a renaissance as qualified professionals join organizations focused on social challenges, environmental issues, and community development. The salary gap between nonprofit and corporate work becomes less significant when debt service requirements don't force graduates toward maximum income opportunities. Social worker Maria Santos transitions from corporate human resources to direct service with at-risk youth. I got my social work degree to help kids, but I needed corporate salary to pay my loans. Now I can finally do the work I trained for and believe in. The pay is lower, but without loan payments I can afford to do meaningful work. Geographic rebalancing continues as professionals distribute across the country based on quality of life, family connections, and community preferences rather than concentrating in high-cost metropolitan areas solely for salary requirements. Rural communities and smaller cities experience educated workforce growth that drives local economic development and community revitalization. The entrepreneurship explosion matures into sustainable small business growth as debt-free graduates invest former loan payments into business development. Local economies strengthen as communities support more diverse, locally owned businesses started by residents who can afford entrepreneurial risk without debt obligations. Coffee shop owner Lisa Park, who used her former $600 monthly loan payment as startup capital, employs 4 part-time workers in her small Ohio town. I could never have risked starting a business while making loan payments. Now I provide jobs for local college students and contribute to my community's economic growth while doing work I love. Family formation patterns shift permanently as couples make marriage, homeownership, and childbearing decisions without debt obligations constraining their choices. Birth rates increase modestly among college-educated populations as economic barriers to family formation diminish. Housing markets in family-friendly suburbs experience sustained demand from debt-free couples purchasing homes earlier than previous generations. Educational decision-making evolves as high school students and families make college choices without assuming massive debt burdens. Career-focused programs gain popularity as students consider practical outcomes without debt pressure driving decisions toward highest-earning majors. Liberal arts and creative fields experience renewed interest from students who can afford to pursue passions without debt anxiety. The psychological transformation proves lasting and profound as mental health professionals document sustained improvements in anxiety, depression, and life satisfaction among former borrowers. The chronic stress of debt management that had affected life decisions, relationships, and career choices disappears from millions of lives. Dr. Michael Torres, who studies financial stress impacts, reports unprecedented findings. We're seeing generational changes in how people approach risk, relationships, and career choices. When you remove the constant pressure of debt obligations, people make decisions based on personal fulfillment, family priorities, and community contribution rather than purely economic necessity. Community engagement increases as debt-free professionals have time and energy for civic participation, volunteer work, and local leadership. School boards, city councils, and nonprofit organizations report increased involvement from younger community members who previously couldn't afford unpaid civic responsibilities while managing loan obligations. The innovation surge produces breakthrough solutions in education, healthcare, environmental protection, and social services as entrepreneurs pursue mission-driven ventures without debt constraints forcing them toward profit-maximized business models. Social enterprises and benefit corporations proliferate as founders can afford to prioritize impact alongside financial sustainability. The year concludes with comprehensive economic analysis showing that debt elimination created net positive economic growth through increased consumer spending, business formation, and productivity improvements from better job matching between workers and careers aligned with their interests and skills. Consumer spending by debt-free Americans stimulates job creation across multiple sectors while entrepreneurship generates additional employment opportunities. The economy experiences growth driven by unleashed human potential rather than increased debt or financial speculation. Political implications mature as debt elimination demonstrates the economic benefits of reducing financial barriers to education and career choice. Policy discussions shift toward preventing future debt accumulation rather than managing existing debt burdens. Some states implement tuition caps, others increase higher education funding, and several experiment with income share agreements that align institutional incentives with student outcomes. As year 2 begins, America learns that eliminating student debt doesn't just help individual borrowers, it unleashes economic dynamism, social mobility, and community development that benefits society broadly. The transformation reveals how educational debt had been constraining human potential, career diversity, and economic growth in ways that extended far beyond individual financial struggle. The new social contract emerges based on the understanding that educational opportunity shouldn't be limited by financial barriers and that society benefits when people can pursue careers aligned with their skills and interests rather than their debt obligations. The question is no longer whether debt elimination was beneficial, but how to maintain the positive changes while ensuring equity and sustainability for future generations. Year 2, the sustainable future. 24 months after student debt vanished overnight, America has developed sustainable systems and cultural norms that preserve the benefits of debt elimination while addressing equity concerns and building frameworks for future educational financing that prevent the return of crushing debt burdens. The educational pricing revolution finally arrives as universities face sustained pressure to justify costs without the buffer of easy student borrowing. Private colleges that had raised tuition knowing students could borrow to cover increases find themselves competing directly on value and affordability. Many institutions reduce prices, improve merit aid, or restructure programs to provide better career outcomes that justify educational investments. State university systems experience revitalization as public support increases following demonstrations that affordable higher education produces broad economic and social benefits. Several states implement debt-free degrees programs that combine increased funding, tuition caps, and work-study opportunities to ensure students can complete education without borrowing. The community college renaissance continues as students and families recognize the value of affordable, career-focused education that provides practical skills without debt burdens. Transfer programs improve as four-year universities recruit community college graduates who arrive with less debt and clearer career direction. Alternative credentialing systems mature as employers recognize that specific skills matter more than expensive degrees for many positions. Professional certifications, apprenticeships, and competency-based hiring practices expand as debt-free workers demonstrate that expensive degrees aren't always necessary for career success. The career diversity dividend reaches full maturity as America benefits from having teachers, social workers, artists, and public servants who chose careers based on calling rather than debt obligations. Educational quality improves with passionate, committed teachers. Social services strengthen with dedicated professionals. Creative industries flourish with artists who can afford to develop their craft. Public health outcomes improve as debt elimination reduces financial stress that had contributed to mental health problems, delayed medical care, and relationship conflicts. Healthcare utilization increases as former borrowers can afford preventive care and treatment without choosing between medical expenses and loan payments. Community resilience strengthens as debt-free professionals remain in or return to hometown communities, contributing professional skills to local economic development. Rural areas and smaller cities benefit from educated residents who start businesses, provide professional services, and engage in community leadership. The innovation ecosystem matures into sustained technological and social progress as entrepreneurs freed from debt obligations continue launching ventures focused on solving societal challenges rather than maximizing returns to service debt. Clean technology, educational innovation, and social enterprises proliferate with founders who can afford mission-driven rather than profit-maximized business models. Environmental progress accelerates as professionals choose careers in sustainability, conservation, and clean energy without worrying about loan repayment on environmental sector salaries. The climate movement gains qualified advocates and innovators who can afford to work on long-term challenges rather than short-term financial survival. The fairness framework evolves through policy innovations that address equity concerns while maintaining debt elimination benefits. Several states implement universal education accounts that provide equivalent financial benefits to residents regardless of their educational path or debt history. Others create community contribution credits that recognize non-college career paths and provide similar economic support. Retroactive fairness programs develop as communities recognize that debt elimination created timing-based inequities. Some localities provide housing assistance, small business loans, or education benefits to residents who paid off student loans before elimination or who didn't attend college. These programs aim to extend economic opportunity broadly rather than limit it to debt elimination beneficiaries. The intergenerational wealth transfer implications mature as debt-free young adults accumulate assets and build financial security earlier than previous generations. Homeownership rates increase among college graduates while retirement savings improve due to earlier investment capacity. The changes create long-term economic mobility improvements that compound over decades. Family stability improvements persist as couples make relationship and parenting decisions without debt pressure influencing major life choices. Children benefit from reduced household financial stress and parents who can focus on family relationships rather than debt management. Educational planning for the next generation focuses on quality and fit rather than debt avoidance. The cultural transformation becomes permanent as American society accepts that educational opportunity shouldn't be limited by financial barriers and that career diversity strengthens communities. The stigma around choosing lower-paying careers for personal fulfillment disappears as society recognizes the value of having passionate teachers, dedicated social workers, and committed public servants. International recognition emerges as other developed nations study America's debt elimination experience and its economic, social, and cultural benefits. Several countries implement their own educational debt relief programs while others restructure higher education financing to prevent debt accumulation. The second year concludes with comprehensive assessment showing that debt elimination produced sustained economic growth, improved social outcomes, and enhanced individual well-being without creating long-term negative consequences. The initial concerns about fairness, moral hazard, and economic disruption prove manageable through targeted policy responses and community-level adaptations. Unemployment remains low as increased consumer spending and business formation continue generating employment opportunities. Inflation stays moderate as increased productivity from better job matching and entrepreneurship offsets increased spending power. Government revenues increase due to higher economic activity and reduced administrative costs for loan servicing and collection. The transformation demonstrates that educational debt had been constraining American economic and social potential in ways that extended far beyond individual financial burden. Eliminating those constraints unleashes human capital, drives innovation, and strengthens communities while creating sustainable foundations for future prosperity. As America approaches its third year of post-debt society, the question is no longer whether debt elimination was beneficial, but how to maintain these gains while building educational and economic systems that prevent the return of unsustainable debt burdens. The success provides a model for addressing other systemic challenges through bold policy interventions that prioritize human potential over financial constraint. The new American dream emerges based on the understanding that everyone deserves the opportunity to contribute their unique talents and pursue meaningful careers without being limited by educational debt obligations that had constrained an entire generation's potential. The long view, 5 years later. 5 years after the Great Debt Liberation, America has fundamentally restructured its relationship with higher education, career choice, and economic opportunity in ways that reveal the true cost of the student debt crisis that had been building for decades. The educational ecosystem stabilizes around sustainable pricing and realistic value propositions as universities adapt to a world where students and families make choices based on educational quality and career outcomes rather than borrowing capacity. Institutions that had relied on easy credit to maintain unsustainable cost structures either restructure or close, while those focused on providing genuine educational value thrive. Harvard, Yale, and other elite institutions find their massive endowments allow them to offer debt-free education to most students, finally living up to their stated missions of educational access. State universities benefit from increased public investment as voters recognize the economic benefits of educational opportunity without debt barriers. Community colleges become preferred pathways for career training as students and families appreciate their combination of affordability, practical focus, and transfer opportunities. The career transformation reaches maturity as American workplaces adapt to employees who choose positions based on interest, values, and work-life balance rather than maximum salary to service debt. Industries that had relied on debt-trapped workers accepting poor conditions or low pay relative to education levels find themselves competing for talent with improved working conditions, professional development opportunities, and compensation packages. Teaching, social work, journalism, and public service careers reach full staffing for the first time in decades as professionals can afford to pursue their calling without debt anxiety. The quality improvements in these essential services benefit all Americans as passionate, committed professionals replace those who had been forced into careers solely for debt management purposes. Healthcare access improves as debt-free medical professionals choose specialties based on community needs rather than loan repayment requirements. Primary care, pediatrics, and rural medicine see increased practitioner availability as doctors can afford lower-paying but socially important specializations. Mental health services expand as therapists and counselors enter the field without crushing debt burdens. The entrepreneurship revolution matures into a permanent feature of American economic life as each graduating class includes risk-takers who can afford to start businesses without debt obligations requiring steady employment. Innovation accelerates across sectors as creative problem solvers pursue solutions to societal challenges rather than guaranteed income streams. Small businesses proliferate in communities nationwide as debt-free graduates start local enterprises that serve regional needs while building community wealth. Manufacturing returns to many areas as entrepreneurs develop innovative approaches to production that compete with offshore alternatives while providing local employment. Environmental progress accelerates dramatically as a generation of graduates can afford careers in sustainability, conservation, and renewable energy without worrying about loan payments. Climate solutions advance faster as innovators pursue long-term environmental benefits rather than short-term financial returns required for debt service. The social fabric strengthens as communities benefit from educated residents who remain local or return home to contribute professional skills. Rural areas experience professional service availability that had been declining for decades. Small cities attract entrepreneurs and remote workers who choose locations based on quality of life rather than salary requirements. Civic engagement increases substantially as debt-free professionals have time and energy for community leadership. Local government, school boards, and nonprofit organizations benefit from younger participants who can afford unpaid or low-paid public service. Democratic participation improves as citizens engage in problem-solving rather than focusing solely on economic survival. Mental health outcomes show sustained improvement as the chronic stress of debt management disappears from millions of lives. Relationship counselors report decreased financial conflict as couples make decisions based on compatibility and shared goals rather than debt obligations. Family formation patterns stabilize around personal preferences rather than economic constraints. The innovation dividend compounds as 5 years of debt-free entrepreneurship creates breakthrough solutions in education technology, healthcare delivery, environmental remediation, and social services. American technological leadership strengthens as inventors and innovators pursue breakthrough concepts rather than guaranteed revenue streams. International competitiveness improves as America develops advantages in sectors requiring educated, creative workforces who can afford risk-taking and long-term thinking. Other nations study American post-debt economic performance and implement their own educational debt relief programs to compete for talent and innovation. The fairness framework evolves into comprehensive community support systems that extend educational and economic opportunity broadly rather than limiting benefits to former student borrowers. Universal Basic Assets programs provide all young adults with capital for education, business formation, or homeownership regardless of their educational path. Community contribution programs recognize diverse forms of valuable work beyond traditional employment. Regional development balances as educated workers distribute across the country based on lifestyle preferences rather than concentrating in expensive metropolitan areas solely for debt service salaries. Rural communities and smaller cities experience sustainable growth while major cities maintain vitality without artificial concentration driven by debt obligations. The cultural transformation becomes permanent as American values shift toward recognizing diverse forms of contribution and success beyond maximum income generation. Teachers, artists, social workers, and public servants receive social respect commensurate with their contribution rather than being viewed as economic failures for choosing service over salary. Children growing up in post-debt families demonstrate improved educational outcomes, emotional stability, and community engagement as household stress decreases and parents can focus on child development rather than debt management. The benefits compound generationally as families build assets and stability rather than servicing educational debt. The economic multiplier effects stabilize into sustained growth driven by consumer spending, business formation, and productivity improvements from better matching between workers and careers suited to their skills and interests. GDP growth remains strong while inequality decreases as educational opportunity becomes accessible regardless of family wealth. As the decade mark approaches, America reflects on the transformation that began with overnight debt elimination but evolved into comprehensive restructuring of educational opportunity, career choice, and community development. The changes demonstrate that student debt had been constraining American potential in ways far beyond individual financial burden. The success provides a model for addressing other systemic challenges through bold interventions that prioritize human potential over financial constraints. Housing costs, healthcare access, and childcare support emerge as next frontiers for ensuring that basic life necessities don't prevent Americans from contributing their full talents to society. The lesson of the Great Debt Liberation resonates across policy discussions. When societies remove artificial barriers to human potential, they unlock economic growth, social progress, and community development that benefits everyone. The investment in debt-free education pays dividends through increased innovation, stronger communities, and expanded opportunity that create prosperity shared more broadly than ever before in American history. The morning sun rises on an America that measures success not by debt service capacity or maximum income generation, but by the diversity of human contribution, the strength of community connections, and the extent to which every person can develop and share their unique talents without being limited by financial barriers that had constrained previous generations from achieving their full potential. The Ripple Generations, 10 years after. A decade has passed since student debt vanished overnight, and America witnesses something unprecedented in its economic history: the emergence of what economists call choice-driven prosperity, an economy where career decisions, entrepreneurship, and community development flourish because they're based on human potential rather than debt obligations. The children who grew up in debt-free households during the past decade demonstrate measurably different approaches to education, risk-taking, and community engagement. 16-year-old Emma Rodriguez, whose teacher parents were liberated from crushing loan payments when she was 6, approaches college planning with assumptions that would have been impossible for previous generations. "I'm choosing my major based on what I want to contribute to the world, not what will pay the most," Emma explains while researching environmental engineering programs. My parents always told me to follow my passion because they can finally afford to support education that leads to meaningful work rather than just high salaries. I want to design clean water systems for developing communities. Her perspective represents a generational shift that extends far beyond individual families. High school counselors report that students make educational choices based on interests, aptitudes, and social impact rather than debt avoidance or maximum earning potential. The anxiety that had characterized college planning for decades, the constant calculation of debt versus earning potential, has largely disappeared from family conversations about higher education. The economic transformation reaches full maturity as businesses adapt to workforces that choose employment based on fulfillment, work-life balance, and company values rather than salary maximization for debt service. Industries that had relied on debt-trapped employees accepting poor conditions or excessive hours find themselves restructuring to attract and retain talent who have genuine career options. Corporate America undergoes its own transformation as companies compete for employees who can afford to be selective about workplace culture, professional development opportunities, and social responsibility. Employee satisfaction reaches historic highs while productivity increases as workers engage more fully in jobs they chose for positive reasons rather than financial desperation. The teaching profession exemplifies this transformation. Elementary schools that struggled with high turnover and teacher shortages now maintain stable, experienced faculties. Professional development flourishes as educators can afford to invest time and resources in improving their craft rather than working second jobs to service loans. Principal Michael Chen observes the changes at his suburban Chicago school. We have teachers who've been here 8 years now, that never happened before debt elimination. They're innovative, energetic, and committed because they chose teaching as a career they could afford to love rather than a sacrifice they had to make despite debt burdens. Student achievement has improved dramatically with stable, passionate instruction. The innovation ecosystem matures into sustained technological leadership as entrepreneurs pursue breakthrough solutions without debt pressure forcing them toward guaranteed revenue streams. American patent applications reach historic levels as inventors freed from loan obligations focus on long-term research and development rather than quick commercialization for debt service. Clean technology advances accelerate as engineers and scientists can afford careers in environmental solutions. Solar panel efficiency increases dramatically due to innovations from debt-free researchers who can pursue long-term projects without immediate income pressure. Carbon capture technologies emerge from startups founded by graduates who can afford to work on climate solutions rather than high-paying but environmentally harmful industries. The healthcare revolution continues expanding as medical professionals choose specializations based on community needs rather than loan repayment capacity. Rural medicine experiences a renaissance as debt-free doctors serve underserved communities. Mental health services expand dramatically as therapists and counselors enter the field without crushing educational debt requiring high fees that put services out of reach for many Americans. Dr. Sarah Kim, who now runs a community mental health center in rural Montana, reflects on her career path. I always wanted to provide affordable mental health services in rural areas, but my medical school loans required me to work in high-paying urban practices for years. Now I serve families who couldn't previously afford mental health care, and my work has meaning beyond income generation. Community development reaches unprecedented levels as educated residents remain in or return to smaller cities and rural areas, bringing professional skills and entrepreneurial energy to communities that had been experiencing brain drain for decades. Local businesses flourish as debt-free graduates start enterprises serving regional needs while building community wealth. The town of Millfield, Nebraska, population 847, exemplifies this transformation. 5 years ago, it struggled with an aging population and declining services as young adults left for metropolitan areas to service educational debt. Today, it hosts a thriving community of remote workers, local entrepreneurs, and service professionals who chose small-town life for its quality rather than being forced to leave for financial reasons. Local entrepreneur Lisa Thompson, who returned home after debt elimination to start a sustainable agriculture consulting firm, explains the change. I always loved this community but couldn't afford to live here while making loan payments that required big city salary. Now I help local farms transition to sustainable practices while raising my children where I grew up. We're building a local economy based on our values and community connections. The cultural renaissance deepens as American society fully integrates the understanding that diverse forms of contribution matter more than maximum income generation. Artists, musicians, writers, and creative professionals flourish as debt-free graduates can afford to develop their talents without the pressure to monetize creativity immediately for debt service. The annual National Arts Festival, now in its 7th year since debt elimination, showcases the explosion of creative expression that emerges when artists can focus on their craft rather than loan payments. Community theaters proliferate as debt-free performers can afford to take artistic risks. Public art projects multiply as local artists can contribute to community beautification without requiring maximum compensation for survival. Environmental progress accelerates beyond all projections as a generation of debt-free graduates chooses careers in conservation, renewable energy, and sustainable development. National parks report increased ranger applications from qualified candidates who can afford public service salaries. Environmental nonprofits expand programs as they attract talented staff who previously needed corporate salaries for debt management. The climate movement gains unprecedented professional expertise as engineers, scientists, and policy experts can afford to work on long-term environmental challenges rather than short-term profit maximization required for debt service. American leadership in clean technology exports strengthens international competitiveness while advancing global environmental progress. Family formation patterns stabilize around personal preferences and relationship quality rather than economic constraints. Marriage rates among college graduates increase modestly while divorce rates decrease as couples make relationship decisions without debt stress undermining their partnerships. Children benefit from reduced household financial anxiety and parents who can focus on family relationships rather than debt management strategies. The homeownership revolution continues as debt-free graduates purchase homes earlier and in locations based on community preferences rather than salary requirements. Suburban and rural areas experience population growth as young families choose neighborhoods for schools, safety, and quality of life rather than concentrating in expensive metropolitan areas solely for debt service incomes. Geographic rebalancing reaches equilibrium as professionals distribute across regions based on lifestyle preferences, family connections, and community values rather than artificial concentration in high-cost areas required for loan payments. This distribution strengthens local economies nationwide while reducing pressure on overheated metropolitan housing markets. Political engagement increases substantially as debt-free professionals have time and energy for civic participation beyond economic survival. Local government benefits from younger candidates who can afford public service. Community organizations report unprecedented volunteer participation from educated residents who can contribute skills without requiring compensation for debt obligations. The international implications mature as other developed nations implement educational debt relief programs based on American success. Global competitiveness in education, innovation, and quality of life improves as countries recognize that removing educational debt barriers unleashes human potential that benefits entire societies. Educational tourism emerges as international students seek American universities that demonstrate sustainable pricing and genuine educational value rather than debt-dependent financing models. American higher education exports strengthen as institutions develop expertise in debt-free education delivery that appeals to global markets concerned about educational debt burdens. The decade concludes with comprehensive analysis demonstrating that student debt elimination produced sustained economic growth, social progress, and individual well-being improvements that compound over time. The initial investment in debt relief generates ongoing returns through increased productivity, innovation, and community development that create prosperity shared more broadly than traditional economic growth models. Unemployment remains historically low as increased consumer spending, business formation, and career diversity generate employment opportunities across sectors and regions. Inflation stays moderate as productivity improvements from better job matching and entrepreneurship offset increased spending power from debt elimination. Government revenues increase substantially due to higher economic activity, increased property values from broader homeownership, and reduced administrative costs for loan servicing and collection. The fiscal benefits of debt elimination exceed initial costs within 7 years, creating permanent government revenue increases that fund improved public services and infrastructure. The transformation demonstrates conclusively that educational debt had been constraining American economic and social potential in ways far beyond individual financial burden. Removing those constraints unleashed innovations, strengthened communities, and expanded opportunities that create ongoing benefits for all Americans regardless of their educational background or debt history. As America approaches its second decade of post-debt society, the success provides a template for addressing other systemic barriers to human potential. Housing costs, healthcare access, and childcare support emerge as next priorities for ensuring that basic life necessities don't prevent Americans from contributing their full talents to society. The lesson resonates across policy discussions worldwide. Societies that remove artificial barriers to human potential unlock economic growth, social progress, and community development that create prosperity more sustainable and equitable than systems based on debt obligation and financial constraint. The American experiment in debt-free education demonstrates that when people can choose careers based on passion, values, and community contribution rather than loan payments, entire societies benefit through increased innovation, stronger communities, and more diverse forms of valuable human contribution that create a prosperity measured not just in economic output but in human flourishing and authentic community development. Epilogue: The morning after tomorrow. 15 years have passed since that Wednesday morning when student debt vanished overnight, and America has become something unprecedented in human history. A society where educational opportunity, career choice, and community contribution are limited only by individual interest, aptitude, and dedication rather than financial barriers that had constrained human potential for generations. The transformation is complete but ongoing, as each new graduating class enters a world where education serves human development rather than debt creation, where careers can be chosen based on calling rather than loan obligations, and where communities flourish through the diverse contributions of residents who stayed or returned because they could afford to follow their hearts rather than their debt statements. Children who grew up entirely in the post-debt era approach adulthood with assumptions about possibility, contribution, and success that represent a fundamental shift in American values and aspirations. They measure worth through community impact, creative expression, and personal growth rather than income maximization or debt management capacity. The morning sun rises on an America that has learned the most important lesson of the Great Debt Liberation: that human potential, when freed from artificial financial constraints, creates prosperity not just for individuals but for entire communities and society. The investment in educational opportunity without debt burden pays dividends through innovations that solve problems, businesses that serve communities, professionals who choose service over salary, and families that build stability through authentic choice rather than economic desperation. The story continues each morning as Americans wake up to possibilities that seemed impossible before that Wednesday when everything changed, discovering again and again that the true wealth of a nation lies not in its debt markets or loan systems, but in the unleashed potential of its people to learn, create, innovate, and contribute to the ongoing human story of growth, connection, and shared prosperity. This is America after debt, not perfect but profoundly more humane, creative, and prosperous than anyone dared imagine when 45 million Americans discovered that their educational debt had vanished overnight, opening possibilities that transform not just individual lives but the very meaning of opportunity, success, and the American dream itself.